Hello and welcome to the Empty Chair, Keeping the Mind in Mind. My name is Previn Karyan. So in this series of videos, I will be looking at the topic of misogyny, specifically as a form of male violence directed at women. And I'm going to try and look at it psychologically and psychoanalytically in terms of why men have a compulsion to be violent towards women. Now, this is a development from a previous interview that I did, and the link is in the comments below, where I had already discussed the topic of misogyny. And in that interview, I made a number of statements. One of them was that feminism had failed to transform male aggression and the capacity for men to destroy. I also said that culture had failed to do that, as had the law, despite its punishments, and education. So we clearly need a different type of analysis if we're going to understand the violence of men towards women. Now, there is a big problem when you start talking about the psychology of the male psyche as a species, because immediately men start getting very triggered at the thought that there could be anything wrong with them. And this is a deep psychological problem because men are highly insecure. And I go further and suggest that men are constantly struggling with a sense of psychological inferiority. So when you point out to men, particularly heterosexual men, that they do have shared collective psychological states, mental states that we all share, there is quite a violent triggering off that no, we don't, and we want to be treated as individual men, as if there is nothing that we have in common with each other. So we have to start off with some of the basics where heterosexual men would accept that there are things that we share. So we share the same genitals, which is obviously what makes us biologically men. And I don't think men would have a problem with that. Even the hardest tough nuts out there would agree that our genitalia makes us men. That's one definition of men anyway. We also go through puberty in a very different way to women. So male puberty is extremely different to women's, and therefore we share that characteristic. We also share hormones, and all of these hormones, such as testosterone, lead to a particular biological wiring of aggression. And if we are biologically wired to be aggressive and sexually compulsive, it may vary according to individuals, but we do all struggle with it in a way that women will never, ever, ever understand, because they don't share our bodies. They don't know what it means to inhabit and live in the male body. And so they can't understand any of this. So I want to develop that idea that women cannot know men. They do not inhabit the bodies or the psyche of a man. They do not understand internal or external pressures of sexual attraction that men constantly feel, and the sexual compulsion of males. They can never understand the aggression of males. They don't get our levels of violence, our need for competitiveness, and our capacity to murder, kill, and destroy, particularly in wars. They can't do that because they don't have our biological brains. Women also can't understand our needs for sexual and territorial aggression, and we need to possess women sexually. We need to possess territory aggressively. That's something that really isn't to do with women. They may share those characteristics, but they're not built into the biological wiring as they are with men. So women can't understand the need for men to dominate in group formation, and that goes back to evolutionary psychology of male chimpanzees, which I will be talking about later. They don't understand why men have to organise society through slavery, exploiting other people through violence and force, and taking more than they give back. They don't understand the pressure to succeed that men have to live with all of the time. The need for social status, self-worth, self-valuing are very different for men as they are for women. Men have to live with failure, depression, rejection, anxieties, constant exploitation from other men in a way that women don't. They have to, when they experience tragic losses, go through the loss of wives and children. And sometimes they can be abused by the aggression of wives and children. Women can never understand what that means. And men have deranged compulsion of sexual crimes, which is very unique to them. And that's nothing a woman can come close to understanding. We have a mania for mass slaughter through the technology of violence. Killing others is fun. You can see it on the videos of helicopter pilots killing people. Torturing others for men is fun. They do it. And they enjoy doing it. Now, are women or feminism supposed to understand all of that? And if so, how are they meant to do that? Where would they start? So, women can't understand men. What do? They live with the psychological states of men. They try to understand us because we don't. They come up with all kinds of theories and explanations because they have to, because we have no explanations for ourselves. And they get crushed into compliance, or they resist and fight back, and they defend and protect themselves in groups, which you could say feminism is. So feminism may be a part of an emotional or psychological protest against the violence of the male psyche, but feminism cannot explain the male psyche because women do not live it. So what do men do? Given that we live it, what do we do with all of our violence? Well, we don't have any, apparently, and we don't like talking about it. We are actually psychologically incapable of talking about the violence that lives in us. And when that's brought to our attention, all we do is react, get triggered, attack women, deflect in any way that we can, rather than have the strength and the toughness of mind to look at ourselves, to stare our evil in the eyes. We just aren't built to be that tough. As a result of that, what happens is we live in states that we are not conscious of, and they drive us where we have no choice and we don't understand what the hell we are doing. And these states have been referred to as unconscious states because we are not conscious of them. But they drive and they dominate what we actually end up doing or thinking or feeling. And these unconscious states were technically first identified by Sigmund Freud and later on developed by Carl Jung and many others. And they came to the conclusion that if you do not know your unconscious drives or your unconscious states, that will be your fate. So men are doomed to their fate, to their tragic fate of sex and aggression, because they have no psychological capacity to look at themselves in that way. So men are incapable of psychological thinking. It takes a huge amount of effort and education and understanding and time for men to look at themselves psychologically. But when men do use psychology, because there are a lot of male psychologists around the place writing books and doing research and studies, what do they do with the psychology then? Instead of looking at themselves, they use psychology to dominate and control other people. They control others through management training or the manipulation of others through how we can run through government policies, corporations, institutions. They use psychology to control their own performance, how to succeed, conquer, or achieve conquest over other people, psychologically. They use it in sports to be better than everybody else. They're so ego-driven that when it comes to analysing themselves and their collective psyche, men can't do it. We collapse. And it's a real struggle for us to see that we have diseased brains. We have chimpanzee brains. It's proved in evolutionary psychology. A few men have written about it, but it's a struggle to continuously see that and understand that about ourselves. And for me to sit here and say I sit here with a chimp diseased brain. Men think that instead of all of this, they build civilizations and architecture and engineering and culture and art. And they have zero explanation for why or how we destroy civilizations, don't value art or culture anymore. No explanation. We have no understanding of male destructive urges. We have no understanding of compulsions. We talk about addictions, but we don't know what they really are. These are drives that wipe out all our rationality, all our science, and they act out sadistic behaviour on others and even on ourselves sometimes. Now, if we can't see any of this, then we have no choices. So the only reason that we are trapped in this fate is if we can't see what choices we have. So it's just blindness that keeps us in compulsive high reaction states, high triggery states, high levels of aggression, and actually perpetual pain, perpetual sense of failure and inferiority. We're never good enough for anybody. So the misogyny series of videos is a springboard or a platform to begin the psychological analysis of the dysfunctional male psyche. And then we hit the question about how tough are males? Are we tough enough to face our insecurities, our violence, our sadism, our sexual aggression? Or is the only tough thing out there a kind of military toughness, which is all based on the model of how to kill others before they kill you, which is actually how we have to survive in society today. Get there before somebody else gets there before you. And that's called toughness. But we know statistically that people in the military suffer mental health issues. So that toughness can be applauded. It can be called incentive, motivation, intention. You can be the toughest man in the MMA cage or on the boxing circuit. But there's another toughness of mind that heterosexual men find incredibly hard to achieve. So here's my question. Can men find mental toughness? And by mental toughness, I mean the ability to look at the psychological truth about ourselves. To look at our irrational drives, to look at our obsession with humiliating or dominating other people who are weaker than us. Can we admit to the fact that we need to find weak people so that we can feel strong? And that is the only way we understand masculinity. So these videos in the misogyny playlist are all about relational violence that exists in men and that specifically can be seen in their relation to women in misogyny. And I'm using misogyny as a location to try and understand the decrepitness inside the male brain, Now, if we understand the disease, then we can try and find some kind of solution for it. But if we pretend there is nothing wrong, or if we constantly get triggered as men, if we constantly keep denying that all this kind of talk is just feminism or, I don't know, Marxism or woke crap, we will continue being sadistic pigs. Because that's what our wiring is. And that is what our fate is. And we can't stop ourselves with all the technology and civilization in the world. And if men don't understand their psychological destructiveness, there isn't a great deal of hope, really, is there? For the human species, as we know. So, there is a need for men to understand their masculinity underneath all this misogyny. That there is something about pure masculinity that's sitting inside misogyny. But we can't find it. Because we can't get there mentally. We're not tough enough. We can't do the analysis because it's too hard. And it's hard because we have to look at ourselves. That's the only thing that's hard about it. But that's the psychological self-confrontation that no woman can ever do for us. No one else can do it. So, heterosexual men need to make an attempt to start the fix that feminism terribly failed at, and that feminism will never achieve. Women have not got a hope of transforming men. This is our job. This is our task. It's for us to do as men. So, I hope you can join me on this series of extended psychological reflections. Please leave your comments or any questions that you have underneath this video, or you can use the contact form on the website, and I look forward to joining you in hopefully something that will be a useful journey. Thanks for being here.